in the sense that we've tried to contain the budget deficit. Our budget deficit is projected to be at 4.1%, which is about 8.1 billion. And why this budget is an important budget is because since 2015-16, we've been on a fiscal consolidation path. And it's been very, very painful, and would like to acknowledge that pain. However, it was a necessary intervention. Because if we do not protect the current budget for future generations, then we would not want to be in a position where we do not control our destiny into the future. And I know that there's been remarks that have been made to say that we are in a tight spot, government is broke, of our respective needs and our respective developmental aspirations. And I'd like to thank you, the executive directors, for taking our hand. In terms of the specific development budget allocations, there is specifically over the MTEF a 3 billion allocation for water security. Seeing that Namibia is a semi-arid country, we have made a specific allocation to ensure that we do not every year go in and be complaining about the drought when we do have water sources, and the only thing that we need to do is invest in infrastructure to pipe that water from wherever it exists to the respective areas of the country that require that water. There has been an implementation of the PPP Act, as well as the regulations have been gazetted. And again, we call on the private sector to take our hand in terms of implementing some of the projects that will be funded specifically through private sector funding using the PPP framework. In terms of the allocations that have been made, again, our social sector takes the largest allocation at 49% of our 66.5 billion budget. The budget has grown overall from 64 billion in the last year to 66.
That education receives the highest share, followed by health and defense and safety and security. It's correct, however, the allocation to education drops slightly over the medium-term expenditure framework by a total of 1 percentage points. That is combined basic and higher education. Health, the share for health remains almost the same at slightly more than 10%. As in the past, and I think it has been raised by various commentators, defense benefits from higher allocations than safety and security. For me, it's also a concern because I think we are more concerned about internal or the state of internal security than of external security. So I think we need to get the priorities right there. Maybe we should even consider over time to transforming the defense force into an effective border guard. There are a few votes, and it has been mentioned here that receive more funds than envisaged in the current MTEF, and other votes where that have to suffer some cuts. In particular, the Office of the Prime Minister received more than previously anticipated. That has something to do certainly with allocations to the Emergency Disaster Fund because of the drought we are experiencing in the country. So that is probably justifiable. But there are also higher allocations to the Office of the President and some other votes where I'm not sure what the justifications are. While on the other hand, and a bit surprising, the ministry that has to deal with the steepest cuts the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and SME Development, and also the Ministry of Agriculture receives less than it was for the new financial year 2019-20 than it was anticipated when the current budget was tabled. And that despite the, and I would say correct priorities on these sectors, agriculture could play a very important role in stimulating economic growth. I think there is huge potential that we haven't really tapped into so far. And also MITSMET is responsible for the implementation of the Growth at Home strategy, and there are about 6 sector strategies currently being implemented. They certainly need financial resources as well. So therefore, I was a little bit surprised when I punched in the data to realize that they actually do not get more, rather less. Oh, it's working. Thank you very much. By the way, we were colleagues almost 15 years ago, I think, or so at Metro. And we still work closely together. So, okay, just to illustrate again what I tried to summarize, these are the votes that benefit from additional resources compared to what was allocated in the MTEF for the current financial year. Among others, National Planning Commission receives 50% more, Prime Minister 25, Office of the President 13, and even National Assembly slightly more. And as I mentioned, some of the votes have to do more with less. Maybe there are some efficiency gains. Also, urban and rural development, they are responsible for sanitation, for housing and so on. One of the critical issues really in the country. I believe if we get this right, we can stimulate economic growth, we can stimulate activities in the manufacturing sector substantially. The Electoral Commission was mentioned. The allocation is increased to 288 million this year because of the elections. But surprisingly, it stays at that level for the next 3 years. So I don't know what other elections are coming up in 2020. I'm not yet informed about it. But I expected actually a reduction back to normal levels. So maybe there are some potential for savings. Then on allocation by item, and this is really, I think, the crucial issue. We see a slight increase. So it indicates that it's very challenging to get the wage bill, let's say, under control. And I was always a bit skeptical about this approach of natural attrition, that you rely on employees to resign, retire, and so on from public service, which is quite difficult in a time of economic slowdown, because the private sector doesn't really offer greener pastures, except for some well-qualified, experienced personnel, but otherwise there's hardly any way you can move out of the public sector. So I think what is necessary is that we have a more structured approach to even reviewing the whole setup of the public sector and embark on a public sector reform, not only on offices and ministries and agencies, also public enterprises. The wage bills there are also certainly quite high, and all the other public entities that exist. It's often forgotten. We have about, I think, 610 or so public entities in Namibia in total. Likewise, the smallest bar, the yellow one referring to SOEs, we have seen a reduction in allocations to SOEs from 2.3% of the total budget to 1.7%, but then again it remains there. So it's anticipated that there are no further cuts in transfers for the remaining of the MTEF period. Social grants account for about 6.3% of total expenditure. I believe this is money well spent. We need to address income inequality and poverty in the country. Not only that people can live in dignity, but it makes economic sense, because if you strengthen the income of low-income earners, this money flows almost immediately back into the economy, and often if they are purchasing domestically produced products and not imported products. So the impact on the economy is much stronger than it would be if you increase, let's say, incomes of the better off. However, it was mentioned that the social grant for people with disabilities and for the old or for pensioners was increased by 50 Namibia dollar per month. In the year 2000, the amount for the child grant and for the old age disability grant was the same at 200 Namibia dollar. If you adjust that over time by the inflation rate and the allocation to the child grant was increased only once, I think it was in 2014 by $50. It's currently at $250, so it's 20% of the pension fund. It has a value of $95 currently, compared to the value of the old age grant of $860 in 2000 prices. So certainly the purchasing value of the child grant has declined substantially. On the other hand, I think we have to acknowledge that the beneficiaries of the child grants, there are 4, meanwhile, has increased from, I think in 2000 there were about 4,000 children benefiting. It's now at least 200,000 or more. So, but we need to strike a balance between increasing the coverage and also making sure that this grant really has an impact on the beneficiaries. Same as one of the favorites always, government spends about 2.5 billion on SEMAS. The public servants contribute about 400,000 to the total cost. So it's a contribution of 16% that even declines to 13% based on the figures in the the budget documents. However, the minister yesterday announced that they are going to double the contributions for public servants to same as, even then it would cover probably more, not more than a quarter of the total costs. There's also one aspect of these contributions I think we need to review. It's a flat rate, irrespective, whether you are a deputy executive director or a cleaner, you pay the same amount per month. We always stress the importance that we need to reduce income inequality, and so if we would switch to a percentage contribution, everyone contributes, let's say, 5% of the gross salary, it would be much more or much fairer, let's say, than having a flat rate contribution. And especially if you now double the flat rate, it hits the poor or the low-income earner, in particular because there are hardly any inflationary adjustments to the salaries. So therefore, we need to find a way to maybe in the not too distant future switch to a percentage contribution and recover more. It should be possible to, let's say, recover at least $1 billion more from public servants, because the subsidy amounts to almost 20,000 per public employee. Briefly on revenues, some of the revenue sources have seen a substantial increase compared to previous figures, in particular other mining companies, but as expected, taxes on income for individuals are downward adjusted by 8%, and VAT almost close to 10%. Fortunately, SACU helps us out this time, and the transfers for this year has increased by 16%. This is not just small change. What is also encouraging, I just compared GDP growth to the growth in income tax and VAT over time, 10 years period between 2008 and 2017. So revenue from income tax and from VAT increased much faster than GDP growth, which indicates that there are significant efficiency gains, and more residents abide by the tax laws, despite these ongoing court cases. I think it also sends a strong signal. You can not escape the arm of justice. It was mentioned yesterday that the tax-free allowance for pension fund contributions will be increased to a maximum of 150,000 Namibia dollar per annum. This is again one of the areas I think and there are many more also in our tax system that is not in line with reducing income inequality. Because tax-free allowance benefits those who have a higher marginal tax rate. The highest marginal tax rate is currently 37%. So if you're in the highest income bracket, currently you benefit to the tune of 14,800 from this tax-free allowance to pension fund. If we increase it to 150,000, it would be 55,000. That's probably the average salary of a Namibian employee. While those that earn less than 50,000 per annum, they don't benefit at all from tax-free allowances because 50,000 is a tax threshold. You don't pay any taxes. So therefore, these tax-free allowances are, I would say, counterproductive to our attempts to reduce income inequality. We should switch to tax credits, that everyone receives a certain tax credit that is automatically deducted from the tax you have to pay, and this amount is the same for all taxpayers. That would contribute again to a reduction in income inequality. And I think someone who earns more than 1.5 million per annum, that is the highest income bracket and the highest marginal tax rate. They don't really depend on these tax credits of 55,000 Namibia dollar. So I think there is these are areas we really need to look into. And if we would have tax credits that benefit, again, low-income earners, it benefits the local and then domestic economy, because these are not funds that end up on offshore accounts and saving accounts, but they are immediately spent in the economy. Quickly on our ambitions concerning the budget deficit and the public debts. We have managed to stay above our budget deficit target of 7%, but we are quite above our public debt to GDP ratio, aiming at 35%. It's going up beyond 50%. In order to stabilize public debts, my quick calculation is we need to have a budget deficit of 2.5% or below. That is just to stabilize, even at 50%. If you want to reduce public debt to GDP ratio, most likely the budget deficit needs to be below 2.5%, unless we can stimulate economic growth to above 6-7%, which I think is a bit optimistic over the next few years. Most of our debt is in domestic debt. Foreign debt accounts for slightly more than a third. It made sense in the beginning to borrow in international markets because interest rate levels were much lower. So in 2009-10, foreign debt accounted for 25% of total debt, but for only 11% of interest payments, which clearly indicates much lower interest rate levels in foreign markets. But this has been eroded by the currency depreciation. So currently, although interest rates in Europe are negative even, you have to pay if you deposit your money on banks if it's more than €1 million. Because of the depreciation of the Namibia dollar, it turned around, and now interest payments are equal to the debt stock. Just in conclusion, I think it's welcome that the capital budget has been increased and funds from operational budgets to capital capital budget transferred. But what is important is speedy implementation. I wouldn't be surprised if we had gone out of recession last year, if we had spent the capital budget speedily that was allocated. But in the midterm budget review, the Minister of Finance announced that 1 billion had to be relocated to operational budget. If that had been spent on the capital budget, it would have improved our economy substantially. I think we also need to ensure the efficient operation of the Central Procurement Board so that we speed up implementation. Compared to the previous years, the current budget deficit and debt forecasts are probably more realistic, although I have my doubts that we will be able to reduce budget deficit to 2.8% by the end of the current MTEF. I mentioned public wage bill. We need to have a different approach and review the whole structure. Likewise with the transfers to the PEs, and hopefully if the act is passed, it gives us more leverage. Same as I mentioned. Yeah, the phasing out of zero-rated VAT for sugar, I think that's a welcome initiative. Sugar is not the most healthy food, certainly. The dentists might disagree, but there are also other food products, milk, bread, that are zero-rated in order to protect the poor. I'm quite sure the poor in the remote areas, they don't have access to milk, they don't have access to bread, they do not benefit. I think we should review all these zero rating and maybe have targeted support for the needy instead of this zero rating that benefits me probably more than any resident in the informal sector. And in order to stimulate economic growth, we need to improve our competitiveness and the investment climate in the country. We are slipping back almost every year in comparison to other countries. So we need to have some concerted efforts there. And we need to have more clarity on certain policy initiatives. NIPA was mentioned that it will be tabled to Parliament this year, but we haven't heard anything about NIF. Thank you very much.
Although I must say it's very, very difficult to be a consultant and you are coming from Capri. I'll tell you why. You know, I go a lot of time to work in Capri in my job, and when I come back, I meet my friend and I'm telling them, no, I've been to Katima a lot of time, I'm consulting. They're like, are you consulting in Katima or across the river? Because consulting in Zambezi means a totally different thing. So they think I'm going there to consult. Consult. Okay, so without wasting too much of it. Sorry. Yes. We are discussing a very serious matter here. Apology for that. So I am a very practical person, and I like to put things into perspective. And allow me to put this discussion into perspective, and then I'll try to connect it to the budget. Now, I would like to start with a little story. And the story goes as follows. In 2015, I used to have a very good friend of mine who owned this house in some neighborhood across the railway, not this side, this side. And I went to Europe to do some work, and I came back. I went straight to him because that's the only place I would take some selfies. So I went to see if I can take another selfie, and I was told he's not there, he had moved. So I followed him, he gave me some direction, and I followed him, I caught him at his house. So, well, I wanted to take selfies, but I couldn't look at the house. So we discussed, I asked him what happened, he couldn't tell me exactly what happened, he just mumbled here and there, but then, okay, end of the story. Then this friend of mine had this car. Then I thought it was parked somewhere behind this house, but he told me he hasn't seen this car, he now drives this car. I asked him again, what happened? Well, he told me it's a long story. I said, okay, fine. Then I thought maybe from here we'll go to his business. This used to be his business. He used to own a lot of trucks. Then we went to his business and I only found one truck. I asked him what happened. He said, well, I don't know. Then I told him that I know what happened. And I'm going to tell you what happened, what I told him. So I told him that what really happened is that he got caught up in the business cycle of things. If you look quickly, you realize that between 2013 and 2014, things were okay. And then 2015-16 started not so well, things started going very not so well, and in 2017-2018, things were really bad. Now, the reason why I put this is I want to put you into perspective as to what is really on the ground. From a business perspective, we who are on the ground, this is the reality on the ground. We have seen so many of our friends who used to drive so expensive cars, now we are sharing the same seat of the taxi. Now we ask ourselves, but what happened? And we need to understand so that all of us work together and move forward, because this is not an isolated incident, my friend. If I ask around the room, for those of you who used to drive Range Rovers 3 years ago, and now they are sharing the same car with me, I will see a lot of hands. But we need to understand what really happened. And if we look carefully to the Namibian business cycle, this is what we can pick up. The period between 2013 and 2014 is regarded as a boom period. This is a time when things were happening. This is a time when you wake up, you're a entrepreneur, and you have got 3 houses in Bloomfield. Yeah? Well, this is a time where I also called myself a business person, even though I was just waiting for myself. Because tenders were left, right, and center, contracts I could get. But then 2015 came in. Things started going slowly. And you see, you get 3 months without a job, without a contract, without a tender. Tenders were only reserved for those, well, I'm not going to say who, but yeah, you know. And then, well, as if this was not enough, 2017, 2018, serious reality began to hit. We saw a number of shops closing. We saw a number of, if you go to the back side of the newspaper, Standard Bank versus Who Mali, Standard Bank, a lot of lawsuits, a lot of repossession took place. That was in 2017, 2018. Now you can see the coincidence of these cycles. Why am I saying these things? I'm saying these things because there is a high correlation between the reality on the ground, the sectors, the economy, to the way the economy has been going. And if you look carefully, you can position yourself, especially those from the private sector. I don't know much from the public sector because that's another different angle. But from the private sector, you can see certain sectors that were really, really hard. And you could see that they coincide with what happened in the economy. I'm only having 5 minutes. Now, I will skip this one because this is pretty general. These are some of the factors that really hit the business sector very hard. The costs of operating, competitiveness, maintenance costs, and operational costs. These are the realities on the ground. And the most recent data that I have points to the fact that more than half of the sectors in the economy are in red as of the 3rd quarter of last year. Now this tells you something. If you have got more than half of your economic sectors in red, obviously your whole economy must be in some kind of trouble. Now briefly, what do I believe is behind this? Now, from what I could gather, this is what I think was behind everything that we're saying. My friend moving from Lodris to Commerce-Dal, and you know, if you look carefully or closely, you will see that the whole issue, and I really stand to be challenged on this, but the whole issue was triggered by the fiscal consolidation. Because if you check on the dates and the sequence of events, a lot of these issues started coming into picture when fiscal consolidation was introduced. And I'm very glad that the ED, the executive director, also mentioned that they are sorry for that. But yeah, it has to be done. So I am sure you understand, you agree with me that really, if you look in terms of the sequencing, the fiscal consolidation somehow has to be. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying this because now, from the business perspective, we were now expecting to hear some good news from the budget. What is the budget going to do regarding the predicament that we have found in, which is more than partially caused by government, by budget? So now, we looked at yesterday's budget, not in isolation, but looking at it from last year, from the previous budget. Because if you look at only yesterday's numbers, you'll miss the whole picture. Now, this is what, wow, this is so small. Okay, now when we look at the 2018-19 priorities that spoke to business, this is what we figured, we gathered, and we were hoping that yesterday's budget was going to speak to these things. Because this is what happened in the mind of a business person. You tell them something today, they already begin to plan for next year. So if you tell me today that I'm going to build a railway here, my business investment decision, everything are based on what you told me. If you don't deliver next year, you have killed me. That's why it's very important that we look at the 2018-19 priorities and see whether these priorities were materialized and support the business. Now, in a nutshell, the few that I picked, one of them was to support economic growth, and here government Ministry of Finance informed us that the development budget was to increase by 30%, and economic and social infrastructure stimulus package was to be capitalized, initial funding of SME financial strategy and youth entrepreneurship, targeted budgetary transfers was to be ensured. And then when you look at the structural reforms that the minister informed us, which speak to business, the following came out, addressing the institutional framework for implementing Procurement Act. This is to really increase the competitiveness and the ease of doing business. The repeal of the State Finance Act, the rollout of ITAS, the establishment of NAMRA. MIDSMED was also highlighted it was said that they're going to implement a single window facility, finalize the Investment Promotion Act, repeal the EPZ, and finalize the NEB, the NEF, utilize the PPP, and then we had the land conference. This was the message of last year. And then when we looked at yesterday's statement, we picked up a few. Of course, the development budget was increased by 30%, in fact, yesterday by more than this, so this was done. Economic and social infrastructure stimulus, well, from yesterday's announcement, we could say, yes, this was also done. The initial funding for SME financial strategy was announced yesterday. Some numbers came out. This was done. The targeted budgetary transfer to the development, we are not very clear. Look, this money will go to DBN. And DBN, especially for the youth, you go to DBN with your application, the first thing they'll ask you, do you have a house? They don't want to see whether you are married or not. No, they want collateral. Yeah. Now, if this money is going to DBN, government must tell us whether DBN will stop asking us those questions. Because clearly youth don't have collateral. So if you are going to take this money targeted for me, you better tell me now how this money will wait for me. Because if it's DBN, and this is the time I spoke to so many young people and they were like, oh, we really miss SME Bank. Because SME Bank, okay, I'll stop here. I won't go here. Now, the second aspect. Yes, last year's minister said, talk about the addressing the institutional framework. Now, when we look at this, we can say that in terms of the Procurement Act, it's really not done. We know of the back and forth pushing that is taking place. We don't want to go with what the media is saying, but some of these things we can clearly see. The repealing of the State Finance Act, I need to really be informed here, but as far as I'm concerned, this was not done. The rollout of ITS, this was not done. The establishment of NAMRA, this was not done. Because this was supposed to be done in March. Yesterday, of course, the minister gave a reason. But if you look at rollout, the repeal, these are they're still work in progress. So we cannot say these are done. For a businessman, you need, it's black and white. Because I cannot go to the bank and borrow money against a promise that I don't know when it will be fulfilled. So this is the dilemma we are sitting with. MIDSMET was supposed to oversee the implementation of the single window facility to really facilitate business registration. But this, as far as I'm concerned, and speaking to a lot of people who wants to use the facility of BIPA, this is clearly not done. There's still a lot that needs to be done here. Finalize the Investment Promotion Act, not done. And here is a big problem because yesterday's announcement, some of them were really hard-hitting. Repealing of the EPZ. 5 days ago, the minister, Honorable Minister of Trade, announced that EPZ brought 11 billion, pumped 11 billion. You saw the news. And then yesterday, the Minister of Finance says, we are going to scrap this. Well, I don't understand from where I'm sitting. This is the policy that brought 11 billion. You want to scrape it out and bring something else. I know they have better reason, but for me, when I look at this, at least the devil you know better than the angel you don't know. Yeah. If 11 billion came in through EPZ, and then you want to bring in something that I don't know how it will work. Well, at the back of my mind, and I spoke to someone who said, maybe it's better we borrow 11 billion and pay rather than, you understand? So it was not very clear. And these are the things that are bringing uncertainty to business sector. Lastly, finalization of the NEF or NEF. We don't know where this is. And this, remember, last year and the year before, it brought a lot of issues. The rating agencies hammered on this. Business sector is still not very sure as to where are we going with this. And these are the things that we really expected to come out very, very clear. And I'm glad the ministry is here. Maybe they could shed some light on this. Utilization of PPP. This requires the central procurement, and you know what is happening to the central procurement board. We're not very sure whether this is really happening, and it's not really done as far as we are concerned. Holding of the land conference, yes, this one really did take place, but we don't know whether what came out was a recommendation or resolution. I'm not so sure. So that's why we are saying it's not clear. Now, finally, my last slide, Mr. Tukati. So when we take a snapshot, a quick look at yesterday's budget, yeah, we agree that it's proper because it focuses on social sectors. We are very happy. And this is really much in line with the election year, so it's an election budget. Preservation of civil service, yes, government can't really, they cannot fire. Okay, so we need to preserve civil service jobs. So it's like we are losing the war on the civil service wage bill. SOE still remains a challenge. I won't say much on this. Yeah, I might apply for a position next year. And the budget is not business friendly for the following reason. Okay, the phasing out of the current tax incentive is still very, very unclear. Remember, last year or early this year, the Minister of Trade launched an industrial policy which spoke to beneficiation. It's export oriented. Now, if you are going to bring in all these export levies that seem like the one that does discourage export, how do you expect to implement your industrial policy? We are speaking going this way, and then we are doing going this way. I am not very, very much sure the alignment here between the ministry that wants to rake in millions using this and what the Minister of Trade wants to do. Because beneficiation depends on the quantity that especially the mining sector will manufacture for export. We don't consume copper here, we only consume copper products that are finished. So whatever we want to manufacture is for the market. But if export levies are going to come in and we're down on this, where are we going? So from a business perspective, I think this needs to be clarified. And then you've got a number of dividends that have to come in there. I mean, if I have to pay dividend tax on my dividend, my willingness to really invest and put my capital in, knowing that I also have to pay for tax on it, somehow it's a bit discouraging. And then finally, the hidden cost. I was very, very happy when we said, yes, we have achieved the alignment of non-core. But at what cost? How many small-scale businesses were left out there waiting for a small tender from government? How many young graduates are still in the street because of the hiring restraint? Yes, we have achieved the alignment, but at what cost? Who has to pay for this? We can be very happy that the budget is being balanced, but at what cost? From a business perspective, these are the things that really goes into our mind every day and night. The increase in social sector expenditure is very good, but how sustainable? Who is going to pay for this in future when the kitty runs out? Because if the engines of the economy are not fueled today, this thing will come and haunt us. So in as much as we are happy, it's an election, everybody's happy, social, who is going to pay for this 5 years from now? Remember, we say about 6.9 billion that we need to pay back. 6.9 billion in interest payment is equivalent to the Minister of Health budget. The whole ministry just going to pay the loan. Mr. Delacaze, I'll take so much of your time. I think I'll stop here.
Good morning, comrades. All protocol observed. Comrade moderator, I've been taking minutes and I've seen that most of the speakers have not stick with time because they've given more time to me. And when I was coming, I was inviting some of the young people to join me, and I'm happy to see some of them are here. However, some of them say, but why are you the last speaker? Then I said, no, but there's no difference as long as you're speaking and people are listening. They say, no, but the people will be tired and they, as usual, they don't want to listen to the young people. I said, no, mind you, it's an election year. They've given us enough time this time, and they really want to listen to us. I think we should be thankful. Dear comrades, I'll be using that word. I like it so much. I just wanted to indicate, a total of 110 billion is earmarked for SME strategy activities under the Development Bank of Namibia, 60 million. All of these things that have been mentioned by our previous speakers, the training and mentorship program, the credit guarantee scheme, the eventual rollout of venture capital fund and skills based on loan facility for young graduates and vocational professionals. These are all good things. The higher education, training and innovation, all these things are good. However, there's always the devil in the detail. Like what Mani was saying, how do you ensure that these figures will ensure that this is translated into the realities, and how will these young people really benefit? Because if you are saying that you are going to give 60 million to DBN, you have to explain, you really have to explain to the young people that when I go to DBN, I will not be asked collateral. And that's what Mali was talking about, putting things into perspective. And however, we also, however, with respect to the credit guarantee scheme, we want government to act as a grantor when youth go and seek for collateral. We are aware that the National Youth Council at the moment is acting as a grantor, but only to Bank Banduk. But that is only for 5,000 or 10,000, less than that. And that unemployed graduates cannot start up their business with 10,000. That's very little. I salute Comrade Finance Minister for the allocation made towards NYC for previous from 10 million to 24 million. And although it's still little as we see it, however, it's really keeping the young people active, although this type of projects that NYC gives is not sustainable, because it's just programs and they are not really meant to ensure that you become an entrepreneur and sustain and employ others. And as we are also aware that these figures, perhaps what they have taken into account is the investment for demographic dividend that we represent, because you are all aware that young people represent 63%, and I understand now it's 73%. So we actually happy to hear that from the deed the ladies did because she's Deputy Executive Director, will ensure that allocation of entrepreneurship programs do not go to operations. One thing that we also need to touch on is the 100 million allocation for the Ministry of Labour and Industrialization. We hope at this point in juncture, there was a previous report that was conducted by Mrs. Tuyeni Kandume on unemployed graduates, specific references to only unemployed graduates. However, this when we try to find out about who's responsible for unemployment in Namibia, when you try to go to this sector and you go to this ministry, everybody's saying no, it's not me, it's not me. At the end of the day, it's left with the mandate of the Ministry of Labour. But we are hopeful that at the end of the day, they will be able at least to create employment for the young people, so as well as to ensure that the employment functioning system, the database for employment information is going to function, because this is very crucial for informing the audit skills in Namibia. Now, let me just go to what I've highlighted some of the things in respect to the presentation, but now I will now focus in detail to vocational training skills. Okay, the focus for funding spent on vocational training up to date continues to show that in 2017 to 2018 budget for technical and vocational training stood at 491 million. In 2018-2019, funding was reduced to 93 million. That shows a substantial reduction, but that is what was allocated, and of course with a bit of injection from the government of about 100 million. That shows that funding has been fluctuating indeed. So how do we make of this view of the substantial reduction with the plight and demand of government in the past 5 years? To say that, as we are all aware that government has been preaching about artisans as the backbone of the economy, and and this has translated into the Harambee Prosperity Plan to say we need to drive this economy by ensuring that the people are invested with skills so that they can plow back to the economy. However, the finding shows that the private sector has indeed come on board and complement the government initiatives via the sector levy that is indeed to support the training levy and skills development. Thank you very much for that. That's one need to understand that this is a private sector and government, but of the levy is going to support the skills initiative. Therefore, it's a complementary aspect that a private sector is bringing. However, this reduction is so severe that it affects other strategic initiatives that are aimed at supporting the sector. It is also imperative to highlight that NIMT is underfunded and presently financially not able to survive. The subsidies amount for the training education of NIMT trainees is not sufficient and will result in NIMT to really consider its sustainability seriously. On the other hand, the private sector subsidy amount to a private training per person amounts to 22,000 per training. According to Ritual Lukonga and others in a paper themed Creating Employment through Technical and Vocational Education titled Overview of the Current Training in Namibia, indicated that through its allocation, the NTA fluctuated between the period of 2014 to 2015, and the budget allocation for the TVET increased from 408 million to 2014 to 491 million, before declining to 357 million in 2016 and 17. However, the 2017 and 2018 fiscal year, the budget allocation increased to 491 million due to the government's fiscal consolidation path on funding, and reduced from 491 million into 2017 to 93 million to 2018. It should be noted that government funding covers the NTA administration cost, procurement of training from training institutions, and personal costs. Additionally, government also assisted TVET students with funding through NASA. Now, we have also tried to find out what is the government's returns when it comes to funding of vocational training skills in Namibia so far. The government's returns on investment has showed that it has provided much needed skills that are aimed at driving the economy. They have also considered the rates of the labor force produced up to date, and they are confident that in producing those skills today, however, those skills are not always to the satisfaction of the industry. However, in 2018 to 2019 financial year, the sector was sitting at 32,120 of trainee into the system, and obviously this has surpassed the target of the HPP, also known as the Harare Prosperity Plan. And this has grown, that in how the government is able to invest on returns. However, the finding shows that there is a mere drop, this is just a mere drop in the auction compared to the number of applicants that has received. So it's good that the government has indicated that this is our target. They have surpassed their target. However, there is more people who are interested in becoming artisans and they are sent back home. So the demand versus what they are able to take, for example, the first year in 2017 at the Vocational Training Institutes received 26,300 applicants. They were only able to take 840. That's a variance of 18,300 was not attended. That's a substantial. These are people we are selling on the street. In 2018, the institutions of technical and vocational training education received applicants of 35,000 and were only able to take 900, and they sent away again 25,000. If one looks at the past 2 years, 2017 and 2018, per sector application, they have received 61,000 in total, and because of the capacity, they are only able to take 10,000 artisans. And that indicates that the interest made by the youth is huge, it's a huge number. And the finding seems to indicate that there is no money, and we cannot say that there is no money if the government is prioritizing this sector. So it's an irony. The levy does not provide for covering running costs. This is serious shortcomings from the private sector. And then also the study also focused on skills and experts needed in the future and how the technical skills liaising with stakeholders, demand and supply. So the focus has been that in the future, the sector is now moving into what is called demand-driven training, and the sector has put up an industry skills committee that deals with sector skills planning for mining, construction, etc. And this serves to inform the focus of what is indeed in areas of investment. And this is where the industry is investing into the levy money from the private sector and also from the training as in order to meet the gap between the demand and the supply. That is the link between the technical vocational training and the demand. And each year there is an adequate, and there is also that there is a report that indicates how this implementation will be rolled out. Into the perspective towards the unemployment graduates of the technical graduates of only this sector, the vocational technical, has been registered on the system, but to the surprise of the NTA, it's only 102, which is surprising, and they were not convinced because there are a lot of people, young people who are unemployed. As you might be aware, those informations are important so that the sector is able to make informed decisions as to what trades are needed in Namibia and expansion programs, for example. However, in the absence of the sector aims to coming up with a new plan that is called economic impact assessment for all the sectors, which will also complement the skills audit. And I think they indicated that it's going to be launched in April 2019. So therefore, during 2017 and 2018, approximately 1,500 to 2,000 young named trained Namibians reached artisan status. From more than 90% are employed, and many proceeded with their training to South Africa for level 4, 5, and 6 qualifications, and thereafter attempting to do their national trade, diploma, and so forth into trades such as technician, engineering status. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, dear comrades, The plea from the sector is that in any budget focus, the priorities must be directed towards the needs and aspirations of the Namibian people. And as young people, they are saying that we hope that their allocation towards the Ministry of Higher Education will be geared towards the technical vocational training allocation. However, we have also come across the fact that, you know, the new doctors that just arrived, about 200, and we are expecting 400 more to come. You know, they are saying that, Comrade Tuyeni Kandume, when you present, also indicate that we are also part of the arts, because the doctoring is an art of treating. And we are left in the street and government cannot absorb that. So I'm just carrying on the message. The sector has went beyond to say this wish, and they have trained about 183 unemployed youth from the technical and vocational training sector, and they have an entrepreneurship training that has so far trained 128 students into skills, critical skills. So what happened is, you know, as opposed to just training the young people and leaving them on the street, what they do is they brought them back, this 183, and retrained them for critical skills that are needed in the market. And in that critical skills, they now assess them, feeding them with some of the entrepreneurship ingredients so that they can be able to start up their company, so that they become job creators rather than job seekers. And this sector is saying we are happy that out of that initiative, 66 unemployed youth has been transformed, and they are now employers of company. I think with that, I will leave the rest for discussion. Thank you.
And I'm sick and tired of listening to people that are insulting our intelligence. I can assure you today that if all the European nations do away with their armies, that's the day we also do away with the Namibian Defence Force. Now, you may argue that, of course, Namibian Defence Force is not strong enough to stand up against armies the type of America and so on. But equally, our country is also not strong enough to compete against economies of America and so on. So to our business people, our companies are also small, they can also not compete. So do we do away with Namibia as a nation? Or do we do away with our small companies? Why should it be that Namibia should do away with the defense force because we cannot fight American arms and so on? Now, in fact, the failed coup in Equatorial Guinea the other time, remember 2004, was financed, organized by British financiers. The same thing happens in Chile during the Allende period. The coup was financed by IT&T. So if private business people are involved in the overthrow of legitimately elected governments, why should we not have our own defense force? In fact, the other day, we were listening to the news. Trump went to Europe. He was telling the Europeans, in fact, more specifically, the Germans, to increase their defense budget. Why is it that? So, of course, we may not be able to fight these big countries, but of course, we also not want to be vulnerable to bands of nationalists that will come here to overthrow our governments. So, the other thing is when we look at the primary functions of government. Primary functions of government, the first item that you'll see is provide security to its people. The other day, Honorable Benani was speaking about trimming government or reducing cabinet positions. But he never, defense was not among those that were going to get a cut. Right? He still repeated it, he still maintained in his cabinet once he was moved out. Now, the other thing also that you need to remember is that taxes, historically taxes used to be collected by soldiers, not by the Ministry of Finance. And the only reason why people today are paying taxes is not because the law says so, it's because it can be enforced by soldiers. Now, you may say, no, of course, the police are enough to do that. They can go and collect and enforce the collection of taxes. The only reason why police can go and collect taxes is because they have their own reinsurer, which is the Namibian Defence Force. So if you are serious about this debate, we should not even talk about transforming them into a border guard. Why? Because border guarding is already part of your duty. If you're serious about not wanting to waste money on defense, just do away with defense. Don't really get into border guards. And then you can continue with the economy and see what will happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. Malik, great presentation. Mr. Schade, all of the speakers, great presentation. I just wanted to make 3 remarks. One on public sector reform, EPZ, and the export levy. Yeah. Public sector reforms. I listened to what Mr. Klaus Schade said. I just question the wisdom of doing public sector reform now at this stage when the private sector is already constricted. People are being retrenched, people are on the street. So now if you now go and reform the public sector and put more people on the street, yeah, that's the recipe for political instability, really. I will not do that now. I would wait until the economy is stabilized. EPZ. From my sector where I'm coming, mining industry, diamond specifically. In Namibia, we have about 13 diamond cutting and polishing factories. All of them are under the EPZ regime. Now, those people, when they came to Namibia, come and invest in this business, we said, let's create incentives to attract investment. Now, you've attracted the people to Namibia under the guise of EPZ. Now you take it away. Now, that's like deception. Now you invite people, now when they are in, you pull the carpet from under their feet. I will tell you, if you scrap EPZ, all those factories will close down. I guarantee you. Yeah. Export levy. I know the intention of export levy was to promote local beneficiation so that we are not an exporter of raw materials, that we become an industrialized nation. But also, if you look at the mineral sector vis-a-vis the export levy, we are saying less beneficiate. And we'll be having this discussion about beneficiation. Say, what is it that you can beneficiate? What is the viable and sustainable to beneficiate in Namibia? Copper, for example. Somebody just mentioned we are a user of copper products. But you cannot expect mining industry to beneficiate copper. That's not their core business. They don't know how to do this. You have to invite industry to do this. It's totally separate industry. So we are punishing the wrong sector. So for me, export levy is really a retrogressive tax. You are actually creating a disincentive to attract investment by doing that. And I can tell you, for example, NAMDEP is reluctant to invest further in exploration and expansion of mines because of this levy. So now you are constricting the economy further. So what you are doing is really what you call the law of unintended consequences. You want to do good, but you're creating bad in the process. Thank you.
My question, starting with the National Youth Council, is knowing the structure in which the National Youth Council is organized. It's more kind of a politically organized structure. So I'm thinking of ordinary youth that may not be subscribing to this structure, how it is meant to benefit this youth. And the budget, the vision is to stimulate economic growth and maybe also to stimulate innovation. And then we have decrease in budget allocation in the agricultural sector, the SME, industrialization, and I think there is a mismatch. If we look at the vision the budget portrays and what it really does on the ground. Anti-Corruption Commission has 60 million, and I wonder what the justification is. And also whether when we talk about the decline in economic growth and the money that we do not have, do we connect the necessary dots and calculate what corruption really does to our economy, and therefore perhaps strengthen the mandate of the Anti-Corruption Commission? Because for now it's more like a waste, because the ACC remains toothless. If we can look at the framework under which and the mandate that the ACC has currently, I feel so sad when I look at that 60 million. I would rather try and strengthen the mandate of the ACC to be more effective. Thank you.
I feel like youth issues cannot be addressed without looking at the backbone, which in this case I refer to the Constitution. You look at the constitutional provision on affirmative action. It only cater for 3 designated groups. You have women, people with disabilities, and then the third being people previously disadvantaged. This group includes everyone basically. But if you look at the trend of unemployment in our country, the most hit are youth. But then yet, the youth are nowhere catered for or at least acknowledged in this law provision. So if maybe I'm here to lobby on this, I'm here to lobby maybe for support from parliamentarians or from both private and public sector for maybe inputs on how we can maybe review this law and if possibly also maybe amend it. Because then the second step would be then also you look at, because the youth are disadvantaged in affirmative action, the second again disadvantage we'll find is that they are also again, when you like the requirement that the Public Service Commission asks for entry level. I feel like can we do away maybe with the entry level requirement for graduates or youth, and then maybe also the collateral issue that we discussed by Mr. Likukela.
Outcome in terms of allocation of those resources. And when we were cutting, we looked at where do we have perhaps excess allocations, where if they were allocated to a different place or a different implementer, we might get a different result. So in terms of, for instance, and it will lead me into my response to my young colleague there. We had an allocation under agriculture to AMTA AgriBizDef in terms of transfers. We've got about 300 million in the development budget that is aimed at the horticultural sector for 2019-20. So if you look at who would be a better implementer of the 300, we arrived at the answer that we would leave the 300 at the Ministry of Agriculture, but we felt that if we allocated a fraction of that amount to a better implementing agent that would get a better result, that might even exceed the allocation that would be made if we made it specifically to a ministry versus an implementing agent that had better abilities to be able to implement. So really the conversations around allocations have been very, very robust. And none of the allocations were done lightly. And when you're cutting from one area and allocating to another, you are aware of what those maybe unintended consequences would be, but there is only so much that we have to allocate. And I know there is now the call from the private sector to say, please, if you continue to cut, the economy will continue to shrink. Unfortunately, if we spend money that we do not have today. The conversations that we're having about the youth, we are taking their future away. And we cannot, as a state, continue to do that. If we think of the position where we've come from in terms of just the fiscal cliff that we were headed to in 2015, 2016, when we decided to take the path of fiscal consolidation, it was not a path that we could have continued on, because you continue down that path and you take away your freedom in terms of fiscal, and you would have to hand it over to somebody else to manage it for you, and this would have been the institutions that we are all aware of, being the IMF, World Bank, would then now come and fund you because you yourself cannot fund yourself and you cannot manage your own finances. So it's hard choices that had to be made. And although it is painful, we're hoping that it puts us as a state on a stronger footing. So during those boom years that we saw, the effect on our import bill was so severe that in terms of the funding that we then obtained as a state, a significant part of that funding went to building up the national reserves that are denominated in foreign currency to ensure that when you present the state, or when you present your commercial bank with an invoice to pay for something that you've imported, there is currency to be able to make that payment. So during those boom years, we created habits that resulted in us in having to shore up our import reserves. It takes money to build reserves. And therefore, in terms of the allocations, we're now in a position where we are saying, okay, if that is what were the consequences of the boom years, how do we ensure that we do things differently and allocate to different activities to secure the future of our youth? So that's one. To the specific question that was raised around technology, it's unfortunate that by the time the budget is being tabled, the work that we are doing, and I'm hoping it works out feeling a little bit better, we have undertaken work to try and see how we can come up with a government innovation accelerator hub. This is essentially looking at how do we ensure, and there are some legal ramifications, not legal ramifications, but there's legal frameworks that we need to work through to ensure that if it is something that we propose and we start, we don't have our youth with technology solutions coming into the hub, providing solutions to the states that are technology enabled and not being able for us to procure those services. So it is something that is still very much in research stage, but the aim is to say that there are a lot of government challenges that require a technology solution. But at the moment, the way that we are procuring in terms of our Procurement Act, because we do not have unsolicited bid, it means that even you as any business person, if you've got a technology solution, you can't come to the state and say, I want to deploy my technology solution, because you cannot come to us as an unsolicited bidder. We are the ones at the moment that would have to go to you and say, we want your service. But what does that do? It then means that you are tendering out your innovation. So if we come up with a different structure that enables for the state and SOEs to say, these are the problems and challenges that I have within a safe space, develop a solution for me, and I source from that platform. And you are guaranteed that the sourcing is going to come from that platform. Your solution matches what our challenges are, and you don't have to have your solutions being tendered out. So there is still work in progress, but hopefully it's going to unlock a lot of doors for our innovators. It's going to unlock a lot of doors for our startups. It's going to unlock a lot of doors for those of our youth and our entrepreneurs that have got technology solutions and they can deploy their technology, which is currently not provided for. So that's one. He's walked out now, but I'm hoping somebody can give me his number. He can maybe help us in terms of finalizing the work that we're doing on the Innovation Hub. The other questions that have been raised or comments that have been made, defense, I'll try and not get into that. I think the executive director has expressed himself. Again, it was a very difficult conversation because unfortunately, when the parliamentarians go into the detailed debate on the budget, we will see the allocation of the 6.8 in terms of where it was allocated to. Because a large chunk of that, let me just get my figures right, defense. 5.8, 5.9 billion. A large chunk of that goes to the payroll expenditure. And unfortunately, it's a very rigid expenditure to try and manage. To such an extent that when we were finalizing the allocations to defense, when they sent us their financing proposal, they had one line item under goods and other services, which means that we've got a huge allocation to payroll, but we do not have an allocation to goods and other services, which is where we've got utilities, we've got food, we've got the uniforms, and the like. So I think it will be an interesting conversation in Parliament, but I would leave that up to the parliamentarians. As to whether we need an army, I think also that's a conversation that is not a Ministry of Finance conversation. That will leave up to the members of Parliament and the head of states. There was a comment that was made around PPP that again it will be subjected to the Central Procurement Board. If we just familiarize ourselves with the PPP Act, it does not go through the Central Procurement Board, which is why I'm saying as private sector, please familiarize yourself with the Act because it unlocks a lot of opportunities for private sector certainly. So it's very different from our Public Procurement Act, and that's why we've got two different acts. So it doesn't go through the Central Procurement Board. In terms of the land conference resolutions, I see it was also ticked that it was not done. It's unclear. In terms of the land conference resolution, there is a specific allocation of about 300 million in the current budget, of which 200 is sitting under the development budget, and 100 million is an increase in land servicing allocations. And just on that specifically, there has been a significant allocation of funds that have been made over the past 2 years and continuing over the MTEF in terms of land servicing. This current budget, there was 692 million that was allocated for land servicing under the Ministry of Urban. There is another 862, if I'm not mistaken, during the current year in terms of land servicing, growing to 1 billion in 2020-2021. So the funds in terms of allocations are there. It's how do we execute on the amounts that have been allocated as budget holders at the different ministries. And I think that's a more important conversation for us to have. So if we have money that is being allocated, are we spending it at the right rate? Are we spending it timely, or are we getting to the end of the year and we have not spent it? And if we're getting to the end of the year, say or mid-year, by August, and you have not spent on your development budget, naturally, we would, in terms of the revisions, we would reallocate that to other sectors that would require that money. But what you're doing is you're then disadvantaging the economy because you're not spending it in a place that enables us to generate and ignite growth. So I think the direction should be, how do we spend the money that has been allocated? Because it's a significant amount. It's not small change. So if we've allocated 862 million to just land servicing, how are we spending that? Are we spending it timely? Is it getting to the regional councils on time? Is it getting to the local authorities on time? And I think those are the questions that we need to be asking. In terms of the One of the other ones was also ITAS. ITAS has been rolled out, so I'm encouraging everybody here, and everybody looks like they are of employment age and look like we're employed, to please sign up and become an e-filer. ITAS has been rolled out. It is, and if you've got questions around how do you enroll, how do you register, they've got a help desk. And I think probably the challenges would be how responsive the help desk is with everybody having to register at the same time, but it has been rolled out. With regards to, there was a comment on the National Youth Council, saying that it's a political institution. I think it's important that we make reference to the Act 3 of 2009, which is the National Council Act. That National Council Act talks about the formulation, the establishment of the National Youth Council and the National Youth Development Fund in the preamble of the Act. And that Act, if you read it quite clearly, other perhaps maybe how it was constituted, in terms of the institution itself, it's not a political institution. So there is an actual act that governs the National Youth Council with the objectives of what it is aiming to do as a council. But that act establishes the National Youth Council as well as the National Youth Development Fund. Now, if we do not make allocations to the National Youth Development Fund, then it will make it difficult for them to be able to carry out their activities, and the fact that it is targeted specifically for youth. So I think it's just us familiarizing ourselves with that Act. It's Act 3 of 2009, which establishes as a juristic person. So it's not meant to be political at all. And then in terms of the comment on the elections, it was an interesting debate, because what you try and do over the MTEF, so we've got a 3-year rolling budget, is to make sure that you don't have significant increases and significant decreases. And it was just one of those things where we said to make sure that we've got that 220 continuing in the MTEF, that we had it allocated to ECN. There are local authority elections in the following year, but not to the same quantum as the general elections this year. And then obviously when we get to specific allocations in 2020, 2021, it will then get allocated out to other needs, and certainly it will probably end up in the social sector as an allocation. I'd like to thank the other speakers in terms of the contributions that have been made. I've made quite a number of notes around CIMA's flat rate, in terms of what we are doing with regards to the tax reforms and tax proposals, the interest that we're paying and the currency depreciation. It's quite interesting that being pegged to the rand, which has depreciated 85% in the past 10 years, that we've got the unintended consequences, but I mean, that is a regime that we are in, and in the end it is favorable, because if you look at the SACU allocations to Namibia, which are actually quite significant. And maybe at this point to talk about SACU. SACU is not like a charity allocation to Namibia. The SACU revenue that gets allocated to Namibia is because we've got one common border in terms of imports as SACU member states. And you've got one country that then collects those customs and excise duties. And if they get collected by Namibia, we then make our contribution to the pool. If they get collected by South Africa as they come into that border, they then get allocated in their proportionate share to the respective countries within SACU. So it is, if we were managing, if we had our own, if we were not part of the customs union, those receipts would be Namibian direct receipts. So I've seen comments yesterday to say that there's a huge dependency on SACU. It is our revenue. It is not something that we are going to have to beg from other countries to get. Okay, I spoke about technology. I don't know if I've left anybody out in terms of the interventions. So I think for the youth,
there is the Government Innovation Accelerator Hub that we are doing research on, and I think that will probably answer the bulk of the youth questions.
Mr. Amutenya, public sector reform is a longer term project. It doesn't mean that tomorrow you receive your letter, you can leave end of April or so. It's a multi-year process, but I think there is need also after some time, as companies do as well, to review whether the structure still serves the purpose or whether it can be done differently, in particular because of technological progress. We can use technology, I think, in government, and I think ITAS is a very good example, and I was very pleased by the responses from the help desk. They came immediately back to me. So congratulations to that one. But again, technology, I read sometime in the paper that even Parliament is going towards paperless sessions also. I think in the budget we allocate 113 million to printing and advertising. You can reduce printing costs substantially by moving towards more paperless offices. It's not needed to print each and every draft and email. I just attended a conference in Nairobi last week. It was a paperless conference. You scan with the QRs, you scan the presentations with your cell phone, you have it immediately on your cell phone. No need for printing and carrying 5 kilograms of paper back home. So no, but really, technologies will have an impact on the operations of our government as well. On export taxes, I believe that this should be possible to process granite, marble further in the country instead of exporting raw blocks to other countries in the world. What mechanisms we use, one can discuss, but there is certainly room for more processing done in Namibia.
Anything?
We are consolidating.
Anything? 15 oh yeah! 15 Namibian dollar. Is that a new thing? Added to. But it was already, it was just added to. I think you must read the statement. There were two new things. The new curriculum and the new high-level panel on economic advice or something. Those are the only two new things that came to my mind when I checked the paper. Go and read. Now, why am I saying this? I am saying this because, in as much as we are consolidating, Mr. Ndorokade, we are dealing with people's lives here. Let us not hide behind these technical numbers and jargons of things.